Alright folks, ooh, my voice is nice and raspy this morning. I just woke up like an hour ago, but today we're gonna be taking a look at my deck that I used to get top 8 in BCS Lisbon for Buddyfight. This is the lowest I've ever placed in a Buddyfight tournament. Normally I get top 4 or higher, but I'm still really happy with it because in the past we wouldn't get any playmats or anything for getting top 8, so this year, you know, and last year too, but last year didn't play. We did, so that's nice, but that's kind of left me a bit salty because I was like, damn, this year I actually got something for getting top 8, and the years before that wouldn't get much for even getting top 3, so nice. Yes, anyway, it's gonna be a bit glary. I'll try to fix that, maybe, possibly, but we'll see how that goes. I think the light is just a little bit hard to adjust to not be glary. Maybe if I put it like this, it's kind of okay, but then, you know, I think we'll work with it, but we'll see. It's the second channel, so I'm not too bothered about these things, but yeah, let's just get into it. So, I did play Battle Buildings. This is my buddy. Big thanks. I should probably give shoutouts first. Big thanks to Linh, my friend, who he gifted me this ER taco. That's already a really big deal, but this list is basically like, I playtested my own lists of battle buildings that I kind of crafted from seeing Japanese tops and then English tops as well. But I wasn't too happy with it most of the time, and then he sent me his list legit like 2 days before, and then I was like, well, I'm just gonna try this, and then it worked super nicely, and I was like, damn, okay, I'm just gonna keep his list. So really big thanks, because it's his list that I used. I also didn't have a Lost World deck, so he lent me his, and so just overall, big thanks to him. Basically one of the main reasons why I got this far, I think, because I did win one of the games that I did because of Lost. And then also big thanks to Joe for essentially playtesting quite a bit before the event in Portugal, so that was quite helpful for me as well. So yeah, so this is the flag and buddy. I'll just set them aside over here, maybe. I don't know where there's less glare. I guess here it's a bit better. So I'll just go through the main deck. First we'll go through monsters. So for Taco Kichi Omega. So call cost pay 1 gauge, ride cost also pay 1 gauge, has double attack, can be destroyed by opponent's card effect. At the start of the day, I kind of forgot that effect, so then my opponents would actually go like, oh wait, shit, I can't destroy it. I'm like, oh yeah, right, you can't destroy it. So that was my own kind of just dumb head not working. But the reason why this card is so good is the act skill. If you're right on a battle building, you can drop top 3 of your deck, put up to 1 size 3 or greater monster, and up to 1 spell from among them into your hand, and you can only use this ability once per turn. So this isn't a named once per turn. So what you can do is, essentially, so I'll just put the flag over here, you can, let's say, ride it, use the skill to mill 3, take a spell, take a size 3 or greater, and then you can call another one, use the ability, mill 3, take a spell, take another one, and then ride on top of it and still use this one because it counts as a new instance of the card because it's no longer, you know, that's just how it works basically. But that's really nice. I really like that part of the effect. It's just good because if you're bricking, and the deck can brick quite hard, I think that's the biggest problem with the deck is that it bricks pretty easily. You can just basically aggressively mill through your deck. You can usually either get your search spells or something else that can help you maintain just the game for the next turn until you can possibly draw into something else. And then, like, getting the size 3s in hand is okay. Normally you want to drop them, so if anything, like, you'll usually get like 2 size 3s and you take the one that you don't want into your hand, and the one that you want you just put into the drop zone. Unless you're playing as like Got Punk and you need to get rid of that the size 2 girl that doesn't let you call from drop, but otherwise, like, the card's just really good. It's good for aggroing or like quickly getting through your deck, and I really like it for that. So it's a good card, and that's why we play it. Then the main battle building, in my opinion, really is the Skytree. So, like, I love this deck just because it's based on, you know, famous parts of Japan that turn into robots, and like, there's nothing better for me than that. So his call cost is pay 2 gauge, but obviously if you call him through a battle building effect, it's only 1 gauge. He has Penetrate and Soul Guard, and his attack cannot be nullified if he's attacking alone, and he has 4 crits, that's pretty big. When he enters the field, you can put up to 1 battle building spell other than Super T Sky Tower from your drop zone into your hand. That's really huge because our search spell is a battle building and our nullifier is a battle building, and this also and this can also take your other set spells obviously, so it's really nice. And then if it enters the field by battle building effect, then you can gauge 2 basically. So really nice card. Sometimes I would play this in the main phase just to get another set spell so I can do more combos during my battle phase. But even if you go into it later, it's still really good. I think it's really strong if you're going first. Even if you set up a board of like Iborg, Takokichi, and Skytree, just attack with a Skytree first and ping them for 4, and then if they're in 6, you can actually use the impact if you somehow manage to really like aggressively go through your whole deck and just burn through a bunch of gauge and just like get 6 different types of battle buildings in your drop zone, then you can actually just FTK them. I never did that in the tournament, but it is possible, I'm pretty sure. But even then, I think just swinging first, putting them on 6 makes it so that if they're playing like EDs or something, they have to like life gain back up to actually, you know, stay out of danger for next turn, because next turn you just kind of OTK them usually. But going second is still really good because then you can usually try to OTK them that turn, but if you can't, then you just kind of grind it out a little bit. And yeah, so good card, but let's go through the rest so I can actually talk about the entire deck a little bit more. So the next one is the Kinkakuji, the Pavilions, so the 2 Kyoto temples essentially that turn into robots. So has double attack and soul guard. Call cost is always 2 gauge. When he enters the field, destroy a monster in your opponent's field, and if entered the field by battle building effect, you can destroy any card in your opponent's field on top of that. And all battle building on your field cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. This includes set spells, which is really huge, because that way, for example, I made a misplay because I didn't really make a misplay, but I just set too many spells without setting the Kinkakuji, and then my ED opponent went to a Susano and killed all my set spells, and then I could only respond with 1 because that's how chain timings work in Buddyfight. But if I had the shrines or the temples, I could have actually cast it, gone into the Kinkakuji mech, and then actually prevented all the other set spells from being destroyed. So it's good against that matchup, but I was just stupid and I overcommitted on my first turn without actually setting the temples. So that was my own problem. But the card is really good because you can target a monster and then target anything on the field. So in the mirror match, you can target spells. Against a lot of stuff, you can target their item. Against God Punks, you can target their annoying spell. Like, you can also essentially call this from hand just to pop that the size 2 girl against God Punks who prevents you from calling from drop. You can just do a lot of stuff, and also when Folktale doesn't set up their book fast enough, you can actually just pop the book if they don't have a way to protect it. And so it's just really nice in that way, so I like it a lot for that. But I didn't play against Folktale during the tournament, it was just during playtesting. But like, I really like this card, it's really good. I think 3 is fine because you don't go into it as often, and sometimes you just don't have enough stuff to kill to really warrant to run more of it. So I think it's fine on its own as it is, and so that's why I think it's fine at 3 copies. 2, Iborg. So this is your main ride target outside of the Takokichi. Call cost same as always, ride cost 2 gauge, and soul guard. So this is the only one that can ride. And so when this card enters the field or ride, you gain 2 life. And if it entered the field or was ride by another battle building effect, you gain 3 life. So you gain 5 life. In time, this is really nice because you can basically loop the Iborgs by just repeatedly calling them, and essentially you just keep gaining life so that you can stall out in time if you reach time. I reached time once during the entire qualifier, but I lost that one because I was 1 life short of catching up. And then the second effect is the really important one. If you ride on this card, the size of all battle building monsters on your field is reduced by 3. So all the others become size 0, and that makes it so that you can actually OTK your opponent pretty easily, and it's just really nice. And he has 3 crit base as well, so that's quite good. And he's just a good card, so if I can't go into a Taco, I'll just ride into him first, because then at least I've got, you know, a bunch of life going for me, and then I can freely call all my other cards. Obviously, he can be destroyed, so if your opponent just targets him, you have the soul guard for 1 of them, because he usually comes in with 1 soul, but otherwise, you know, you might have to go into a second one, but it's not really a problem, because you can recycle the Ibo spell, and then you can just go back into him again for 1 gauge, so it's not really a big problem. Also, my sleeves are these Komiket Korin sleeves, so that's quite nice. I changed that last minute. And then I play a bunch of one-ofs. So the first one of that's I think quite self-explanatory is the Makharimes. This one reduces the next damage you take by attacks to 0, so specifically by attacks. And then if this card enters the field by battling effect, you draw a card. So it's quite nice. Be careful with obstructs and stuff to, not draw a card, basically. And then his second effect, which is what I like, is damage you take are reduced by 1. So again, stuff like Folktale, which keeps poking you for 1, it's actually quite nice because then that just goes down to 0 and then they can't really do anything against you. So I like it for that. It's quite good. And then it has Soul Guard, but nothing else apart from that. So it's just a nice little one-of. Then the other one that I think people see coming is the Big Cybird. Some people play 2. Call cost same as always, has Soul Guard. All other battle building on your field get power plus 5. And then his second effect is when he comes into the field, you draw a card, so just when you play him. And if he enters the field by battle building effect, you can choose an opponent's card on the field, and that target cannot stand during this and next turn. So this kind of sucks against EDs because usually they possess, in your main phase and they're on stand, so you can't really do anything against them. But against a lot of other matchups, it is a really nice card and it just works out quite nicely. The plus 5k is also good against EDs because they have a lot of spells and effects that minus your attack and your crit, but at least with the attack you can still get over the big Amaterasu numbers, so that's good for that. But it's a nice card, so I just play it as a one-of. And finally, the one-of that I really didn't want to play for a long time, and then my friend Linh actually kind of enlightened me, is the Grand Holder. He's a bit of a win more card, but he's good at finishing games. So when he enters the field by building effect, for this turn he gets triple attack, so he swings 3 times with 2 crit. But if you're right on a battle building, all battle building on your field cannot be arrested by opponent's card effects and get plus 1 crit. So this is 3/3/3, attacking your opponent, so it's really good, and everything else you attack with gets plus 1 crit. So your Skytree, which can't be nullified, is also attacking for 5 crit. So it's good for those games where you can really properly extend with him and just kind of OTK even easier than normal, so that's why I like him. And then for the set spells, we run 4 Skytree because it's the best one and we run 4 Skytree. So you want to loop this sometimes just to keep bashing your opponent for unnullifiable attacks. Obviously they can reduce the damage, and they can also, just gain life to prevent the entirety of the damage or all that kind of stuff, but it just cannot be nullified. But Skytree is good, and also has the ability that start of your turn you can mill 3 and then take 1 battle building spell from among them into your hand. So usually good to just keep it set sometimes, but I rarely use the set part of it. Actually, I run a few cards where I purely just use the sets, but then that's not one of them. But one of them that I tend to is obviously the Aibo Academy. Buddy Academy Hostel, as it's called. So start of turn, draw a card. It's just self-explanatory. Drawing cards is always good, but even then running 4 is good because you can loop the Iborg to gain a bunch of life, and it's good if you can actually set them up consistently. But even then, just keeping it set, having 2 and only using 1 and then keeping 1 set to keep drawing an extra card every turn is also quite nice. So it just kind of depends. On what kind of game you're playing and against what kind of matchup. I think this is just a good card together with Iborg itself. Then we run 3 of the Temples. This I think has one of the worst set effects because it's pay 1 gauge to gain 4 life. When you're in a win more position and you have 12 gauge or something, something crazy, when you just have too much gauge, then I use it, but usually I don't really, and you have to be really careful with setting this because if they pop it, you need to respond with this, and you have to have the mecha to actually bring it out to prevent all your other stuff from being destroyed. So I kind of I only really set this when I know that I can go into it, and then I have to be really careful with my sets otherwise so that my opponent doesn't pop them. So that's something to consider. Then the one that usually stays set is the Muck Ocean Mess, so the Makhari Mess. Start of turn, you drop a battle building from your hand to target any battle building in your drop zone and add it to your hand. Your impact is battle building, all your monsters, are battle building, your spells are battle building, your nullifier is battle building, your searcher is battle building, so you really use this a lot. You can also drop a Takokichi from your deck with the searcher and then search this, and then next turn you can drop something else to take the Takokichi into your hand if you really desperately need it. So I think it's just a really good set spell. I like to keep 1 on the board most of the time just because it's nice. This start of turn gauge 2, otherwise they all have the same effect where counter speed, pay 1 gauge. If you do call the specific mech from your hand or drop zone without paying the call cost, so you just pay the 1 gauge, and then put this card into the soul. So they all have that effect, except Aibo Academy actually rides. So it's the same effect on all of them. They're not once per turn, they're not 1 per set, and they all have counter speed timing, but when your opponent targets one of them, you can only respond, or like targets all of them, you can only respond with 1, and stuff like that. So it's just something to keep in mind, but play just 1 because the gauge effect isn't that good, and Cybird in general I only go into very rarely. Same with the Grand Hall. I use this sometimes against Lost World, it's kind of okay. When they go into Lost, basically, it's alright because it's, what, like 1 life for 1 destruction, so it's kind of nice in that regard, I think. So you can destroy any card, which is really nice. It's not just like destroy a monster. You can target spells, target items, target basically anything. So when you're really far ahead on life, like 20 plus, I use this quite often, so sometimes I just keep it set if I don't see the Grand Holder coming out. So, you know, it's kind of good for that. But this video is getting quite long, so I should probably hurry up a little bit. For the Searcher, when they were revealing the battle building cards, I was like, oh, this deck looks cool, but if they don't get a Searcher, it's gonna be garbage. And then they got a Searcher with battle building in the attributes, and I was like, wow, okay, like that's just insane. So this card is pretty damn good. Pay 1 life, drop a battle building monster from your deck, and then put up to 1 battle building spell with set into your hand and shuffle your deck, and then you can only cast it once per turn. If you cast it and they nullify it, you can still cast another one because you technically didn't finish casting it because it got nullified. So it's just a good card because it's also searchable. Your Skytree can add it to your hand, and also like you can take it with the Makharimes back into your hand, and just all the effects that like target spells can add it to your hand. An important thing with Takokichi is that it takes any spell, so it doesn't have to be a Hero World spell, so we can play generic cards in the main deck too, which I do. But the Surging spell is just really good, and so it's definitely something you want to play at 4 of. Another card you want to play at 4 of is obviously the Nullifier. This is the only Nullifier I play, but it's so good and it's searchable and it's magnificent. So you can only cast it during an attack on your opponent's turn, and if you have a battle building on your field, you nullify the attack, put the top card of your deck into your gauge, you gain 1 life, and if you have 3 or more battle building on your field, draw a card. So if you're set 3 and pass, you can actually just null, gauge, life, draw. That's so good. And you can salvage this from your drop zone, you can salvage this by your mill effects, you can search it. It's just so good. It's so nice. I don't think I need to explain much. The one card, like this main deck, cost me about 80 bucks. But what also cost me, well, it didn't actually cost me 80 bucks. This cost me 60 maybe for the 3, is the Hero Time. This card is really good but really expensive. It's going to be a staple forever, I think. Well, unless they print a better card potentially at some point, but I hope they don't. But this is a universal staple in Hero World. Like, I'm glad I picked mine up now, because I picked them up for 2 of them for 25 apiece and 1 for my friend Linh for 15. And so like this card is gonna stay good forever. So it's like I paid 60 for at least like a year's worth of playtime with this card. So it's like I'm okay with that. But anyway, you can only cast this card when you have an item equipped, which means if you ride or transform or anything like that, you can use it. Pay 1 life, look at the top 3, put 1 of them into your hand, the rest into your gauge, once per turn. So it's so good because you accelerate your gauge, you take anything. It's basically a Bat's Link, but I think that's what the card is called, but in the main phase. So it's super good, and it's so good like in every Hero World deck. So if you can pick them up, you play them. I main deck 3 spell nulls. This might be a bit questionable to some, but I think you need this not just to spell null their, attack nullifiers, but against EDs, you want to nullify their searches. Against the mirror match, you can nullify their searches, but if they have another one, it's a little bit problematic. But it's just, you can nullify so many important cards against so many matchups. Like, I just really like main decking this a lot. If I draw into more than 1, I usually gauge it, because you don't tend to use more than 1, but the deck has really good gauge acceleration, so you can use this quite consistently. It's also not once per turn if you want to use it more than once, but it's just really good. I know it's a bit expensive now. Like, I've been playing Hero World since day 1, so I picked these up for like 50 cents, or not even that. I think we just opened boxes with my friend, and I just like took the ones that we pulled because I called dibs on the Hero World part of the set. But yeah, so I have a full playset of these, but I main deck 3 because I think 3 is more than enough but most people side deck them, but I think main decking them is fine in buildings. One Obstruct, because you can only play one. It's still a really good card. Pay 1 life, but you can only cast it during your opponent's turn, and then for this next turn, each player cannot draw cards by their own effect. So this shuts down a lot of decks that draw a lot, so they can still search, but they cannot draw. So a lot of the effect where it's like, you call this card and it's like if you have certain attribute on the field, you just like gauge 1, draw 1, or like gain 1 life, draw 1. And so it shuts down a lot of those stuff. You can cast this in response to a draw effect, and you're actually going to block the draw effect. So that's something that I learned from Hunter Surge, actually, from our little playtesting session as well. So usually want to be doing that, but it's a good card, but it's restricted to 1 because it's not very fair, and I think it's good. Another card that might get restricted in the future is Loyalty. I main deck 3 because, again, you can take the generic spells with a Takokichi, and that's really good. Loyalty is really important for that last effect. For this turn, your opponent cannot call more than 3 monsters, but you can also use it to reduce damage by 2, but for 1 gauge that's quite a lot, and you can also drop a soul, but usually use that last effect. Against Folktale, this destroys them. I usually side this out against the ED matchup. The mirror match, this is really good. I think it's just really good against a lot of matchups, and so I like it a lot for that, but especially Folktale, this deck just kind of destroys, and so it's, I mean, this card destroys, so it's really good for that. I like to main deck it, and the 1 gauge usually isn't a big problem either. For impacts, I play 2 of the Power of Justice build power extension. Only cast it if your opponent has 6 life or less, that's important, and if you're ride on a battle building, so you do have to be riding on a battle building, and then you pay 3 gauge and deal 1 damage to your opponent for each different battle building in your drop zone. So it also has battle building attribute, so you can search it, which is really nice, and essentially, yeah, like, the card's just really good. I think it's just, like, it's pretty easy to get off, so I just play 2 because you can also search it. They're foils, so that's nice. It's like my only foil in the deck. But it's just a good card. I think it's worth playing. Like, every battle building deck plays them. And then these 2 are my Lost Worlds. I don't own Lost World, so I had to borrow the flags as well. But yeah, it's just Lost World. And then here's a picture of my Lost deck that I borrowed from Linh. I only played 1 gun when I could have played 2 because I'm usually riding on something, so I didn't really have a need to play more than that, but that's just what the Lost deck looks like, and I will quickly go over the side so that we don't go overtime. Obviously, siding 3 Wind Ghost Errol. This is against the ED matchup because in your final phase you call this and then you bounce their, well, usually Amaterasu or Susano or that Ame no Wakahiko, I think the other one is called. But you bounce it, and then basically because of the ruling, they have to essentially drop the item, if I'm not mistaken. But I had the ruling explained to me kind of last minute, but I was like, oh, okay, well, this card is good, so I'm going to play it. So usually side out the loyalties and side these in against EDs because they don't tend to call more than 3 that often. So this card's, well, just really good. 3 chest breaks in the mirror match. This is really nice because for no cost, you put up to 2 spells from your opponent's field in the bottom of the deck in any order. This is good for the mirror match, so you target 2 of their set spells. They can respond with one of them, but the other one has to go to the bottom. But the one time I played the mirror match, my opponent didn't respond with any of them, so I was like, well, okay, thanks. So then, you know, that just kind of ended like that. So it's a good card. You don't really side against anything else. And then my kind of like extra in case I need battle buildings is 1 of each of the big site and 1 of each of the Makari Mess, just depending on the matchup. So I'd probably side this in against Folktale, and then this, I considered siding it against EDs just for the extra power, but in the end it didn't really do much, so I might take these out. I'm not sure really, maybe not the spell, but that's just like kind of like my extras in case I need them, but I literally never went into these. Like when I was siding, it was always the first 6 cards, so the Errols and the chest breaks. That's really where the deck shines properly. So in terms of matchups, I can quickly go over them before the video gets way too long and I have to go to class. So round 1 played against Godpunks. I won 2-0. It was pretty snowbally, I think. I just popped, like he would set up the monster, doesn't let me call from drop. I just normal call the shrine and then pop the monster, and then I just set up my combo and win. So that was basically it for those 2 games. Round 2 played against Dimension Dragons. He set up Lost World like as soon as he could on both games, but I managed to kind of just overextend and win both of them. Round 3 was against EDs. I lost in time, so that's the one where I was like 1 life short of winning. That was a really good match against my friend Brian, and it was just really, really fun. So that was really like I was so nervous that day, like in terms of like just like my heart, like my pulse going crazy and all this stuff. Like this doesn't happen in standard when I'm playing, so I really like that Buddyfight still brings out that kind of emotion out of me. So that was a really cool round. Round 4, I played against the mirror match, and I won that one 2-0 because I said it in chess breaks around with game 2 and he didn't respond, and then game 1 I just kind of like set up my combo. I kept popping off his spells when he didn't have targets, and or like he could have had targets in hand but he didn't, so you know, I just kind of steamrolled over that. And then round 5 I played against Charles, who was playing God Punk as well, and it was kind of like it was actually quite close because I bricked really hard game 2, so I lost that one. And then game 1 I kind of did the same as in my round 1, where I just popped off the one that doesn't let you call from drop, and then I just kind of went from there. And round 3 I set up a really strong turn 1 with like Iborg, Skytree, and the Taco, and then I just like pumped him with the Skytree for 4 damage immediately. I had nulls, I had the loyalty, because he was actually trying to like spam call, so I loyaltied him. I also obstructed him so he couldn't draw, and just in general just did so much. I just had like a god hand that last game, so I really I think I had the best opening hand I had in that whole tournament in that one game of the last round of Swiss. So then I got into top 8, and then in top 8 I played against my friend Joe playing EDs, and he outplayed me completely, and even siding against him didn't really work, so that was just like my own complete loss, but it was still a really, really good game, and so I finished in top 8 in the end. So that is it for this little tournament report slash deck profile. I know a lot of you asked for Buddyfight deck profile, so here you go. I actually managed to achieve something, but it was really fun. Buddyfight's really fun. I like the meta. Lost World is kind of meh. It costs too much, but you know, maybe it's going to become obsolete next year, so let's hope for the best. But right now it's really fun, and I do recommend playing it if you can. If you can pick up a deck for 100 or less, I heavily recommend it. It's just a really fun game, so try to get your friends into it with the triple decks and see where it goes. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.